So this next video, I'm going to introduce two tools that don't really have anything to do with one another, but they sort of work well together in demonstrating one another only because the first tool will give me a piece of data that's a nice input into the second one. And the first tool I'm going to teach in this video is called Merge. Which is a cool tool, nothing super special. It's really just used often when you have segmented data. It comes to you in various forms, or if you've maybe created some kind of data and then over time collected data that's identical, and you need to sort of bring it all together into one unifying shapefile, so you're not working with a bunch of different pieces of geographic data. So it's really kind of a repair tool, and you'll see that when we run it, it actually exists in the data management toolbar, because that's really what it is. It's helping sort of manage and edit our data. So I went to Insert and made a new map. I'll call this map Merge and Spatial Join, which is the other tool we're going to learn. I'm going to hold off my discussion about that till we get to that point. I dragged in neighborhood 1, 2, and 3. Notice if you open the attribute tables of each of them, just to sort of get a sense of what we are working with here. There's a couple fields to pay attention to, really, especially our attribute and N1 field. Right, notice they all have this sort of, we all have this value here, and then here they have a different value, one that says, neighborhood 2's field and neighborhood 1's. And as weird as that looks, that's created so that once we actually execute the tool, I can clearly show you how Merge treats attributes. So as I mentioned, Merge is in the Analysis Tools Data Management toolbar. We are used to accessing tools thus far in like a different way. Like selections, we would just go right up here to select by attribute or select by location, or right click and geocode or plot an XY coordinate. But interestingly, a lot of the tools we've been using are here. They're just hidden in different areas. Right? Like if I open fields, hey, we've added fields before. We've calculated fields. We've deleted fields. That was kind of some of the first stuff we did. We've exported data, we've copied it. If I keep going down to layers and table views, well, hey, we've selected layers by attribute, we've selected by location. Hanging out in here somewhere as well is plot XY coordinate. But this is actually kind of where a lot of the tools, sort of exist that we've been playing with. And, the reason that's true will become more clear when we get into Model Builder to finish the semester. We need a way to access kind of any tool, even those that we've, predominantly engaged with more through right clicks. But Merge is in general, and it's right here. So I can take out Merge. It's another one, whenever it says datasets, it's just going to want, multiple. Again, I can do it like this if I want, or I can just start dragging one at a time. All right, well, I want to merge 1. I want to merge 2, and I want to merge 3. What opens up here is the concept of a field map. I don't want to get too deep into it just yet. It's definitely going to become really important when we do the spatial join. But it essentially just lets us see, kind of where things came from. And, the cool thing is, anytime when there's like a field like name, for example, so I'll open that up and look at neighborhood 1 and look at neighborhood 2, for example. Name is a field that is universal, right? It's in all 3 of them, and that's reflected here, right? It's actually telling you in the parentheses, hey, all 3 of them had a name field. Here's what it was here, here's what it was here, here's what it was here. Now you could manually come in and change this. I could say that your name field is actually, our attribute. I don't know why I would do that, because it's kind of nice that they would all put this value in the same field, but that's what that's letting you do. Now that's different than fields like N1, N2, and N3, right? Those are not unique. That's why I built them like that. They have a different name, and therefore are somewhat like unique. So they're going to create 3 different fields, an N1, an N2, and N3. Now I could theoretically like bring neighborhood 2 in and say, well, wait a minute, I understand that your name is actually hidden in the N2, right? And I understand, you know, that you, neighborhood 1, you're hidden in the N1 field, right? And that theoretically would then kind of put it all, as you can see, in that 3rd field right here. And I could come to you, you know, by clicking. Used to be able to do that. And I could go to rename and, you know, give you another name if I wanted to. You know, merged field. And that would obviate the problem. I'd be putting all 3 of the values in there. But for now, let's not do that. Let's simply kind of let it be what it used to be, which I think was originally N3 field. Right? Rename. But again, that's just the way that that the field map actually works, right? It lets you sort of control kind of what fields are going to merge with what and how it's ultimately going to look. So I'd hit run, you know, it'll do its thing, and eventually it'll take what was 3 separate pieces of data and make it 1 giant piece of data. And that's important for the next step, you know, because I'm going to want to ultimately use these neighborhoods to get a sense of how many people live in each of them. And I didn't want to have to do it 3 different times, right? The next tool I'm going to run, I didn't want to run it for neighborhoods 1, 2, and 3. I want to just do it on 1 file, which is neighborhoods. But if I open the attribute table, what I can see here, right, any attributes that they all shared, they merge it into that row. And like we saw here, right, you know, N1 field, N2 field, and then looks like I did not successfully change the name away from merged field. That used to be N3, if you remember. But you can see, like, neighborhood 2 had a value there, but nobody else did. Neighborhood 3 had a value here, but nobody else did, right? So it just kind of created 3 new fields for that. So that's merge. Puts data back together. So the next tool that I'm going to introduce is one we sort of learned at the end of class last time. It's kind of sitting right here. And I sincerely believe it to be one of the more powerful tools in ArcGIS. Now, Pro has kind of taken what you used to accomplish with Spatial Join and added several kind of other tools that are similar to it, you know, that kind of get down to the point a little bit quicker. And so we'll kind of open up the next video with those. But I want to teach you Spatial Join first, just because it's the originator and it's also the option you have back here if you ever go back to desktop. So here's what we want to solve. We now have a layer of neighborhoods, and they tell you the name of the neighborhood and the size and some other information. There's 158 of them in Philadelphia. And maybe you want to know how many people live in every neighborhood, or how many homes there are, or how many people of different races and ethnicities. But a neighborhood, just like a site boundary you might draw yourself, isn't kind of an administrative one that the census or whomever is reporting data on. So in a sense, you would need to take data from another source and join it spatially. And that's what we need to do here, right? If I have these census blocks, and I'm going to kind of change the symbology here of my neighborhood 1. You know, I'm going to move it away from having an interior color and give it sort of these dark kind of red boundaries on the outside, just so it's easy to see. And as you can see, right, every neighborhood would have within it a number of different blocks, right? Census designated blocks. And if I go to the attribute table for the census blocks, I'd see that they have some information. They can tell me the number of people in each of them, the number that are black, white, Native American, Asian. All of this kind of data that I prepared for class exists within each one of those. This could be so many other things. Perhaps you didn't have polygon data, perhaps you had points, and those points were home sale locations, or measurements of pollution, or, Yelp rating reviews for certain businesses. But the point is that you have pieces of data, census blocks in this instance, that exist within another larger data set. And so what we want to do is bring these two together in such a way that neighborhoods can now return back to me and tell me for each individual neighborhood what's the total population, right? It can actually look at all the blocks that are within it. It can access this field and it could add up all of the individual values. And then you would get to know total population per neighborhood. So you set it up like this. Spatial join, bring it out. Anytime you run a spatial join, a target feature is what you want to return to you. I ultimately want the neighborhood data to come back, obviously. I want to be able to report my findings at a neighborhood level. And the join data is really kind of what you're joining and summarizing. I want to join and summarize census blocks. There you go. You get a very similar kind of setup that you had before. Now, here are the incredibly important components. Notice, like, if I'm moving down kind of at the top, it tells me, hey, you merged field, list name, you came from neighborhood 1. That's where you came from. Eventually, I'll get here, and it came from census block. Now, if I do nothing, it's just going to kind of merge all of the data together. And that's kind of important, right? If I come down here to this pop field, population, everything defaults to what's called a merge rule. And what that means is, like, let's look at this neighborhood, for example. So, like, just to show ourselves what I mean, if I take my selector and I select manually this neighborhood right here, and then I run to select by location, which we did previously, and I say, let's select all of the census blocks that intersect, or maybe let's say that are within, completely within maybe, my neighborhood 1. And it'll run it, right, in a certain number of blocks that are completely within it, right? There's some that aren't fully within, they're basically within, and I'll kind of talk about that geographic limitation in a second. But all of those ones are kind of within that census block right there, or sorry, within that neighborhood. And if I open the attribute table to examine further, right, I can see they all have different values within population. I'm bringing this up because if I want to run that sort of spatial join I was just talking about setting up, and same thing, I would want my neighborhood, and I'll fix the selections in just a moment. But if I had neighborhood and then I'm joining to neighborhood the census blocks, since this tool is taking like 36 different blocks and quote-unquote joining them to the neighborhoods, it needs your advice on, hey, when I get to that population field, well, what value should I take back? There's 36 different ones I could pick from. What am I supposed to do? And the default is first, like literally meaning however the data is sorted, whatever it comes across first. Oh, I came across one that has a value of 242, so I'll bring back that. But that's not what we actually want, right? You want to just engage it. And then a world of possibility opens up. Now you can calculate statistics on the fly. Hey, take those 36 values and bring me the minimum. Bring me the maximum. Add them all together. Calculate their average. Show the standard deviation, the median, the mode, and the range. Suddenly, this isn't a tool that's about joining things together, but one that's about summarizing based on a spatial relationship. So if I clear all of my selections so as not to sort of, kind of mess up the analysis of this tool, and I'll back up and then go right back into my spatial join here. Oops. Sorry about that, gang. Spatial join. Target features, I want neighborhoods to come back. I want them to tell me about the census blocks. I'll give it a name like neighborhood with pop, neighborhood with pop. Important here to get this match option. Like, how do you want to do it? Like what we might do here is just say, intersector within. And I'm going to show you a technique why that's limiting, because theoretically, like, the boundaries aren't perfect. So, like, that ridiculously small thing here, you see that? That actually would intersect this. And, right, it's not a perfect line, and so it would give all of its population over here, even though it only has a sliver. And I'm going to show you kind of a way to get around that in a second, but for now, let's just do kind of the within function. And so in the field map, here's what I do, right? I don't need to actually know this. Like, I don't need to know the block's name because there's going to be like 36 blocks that join. I don't need to know just one's name. I don't need this stuff. All I need are the statistics. And once you get down to the statistics like population, pick sum. Let's just do white and black to start to make it simpler, but do sum, and then do sum. And then the rest of them, we would normally do sum for these, but just delete it, for kind of time-saving purposes. All right, so then you would run it. It'll do its thing. Again, it just brings back the neighborhoods. But if I open the attribute table, I can see some new information here. First, I have this thing called join count, which seemed to fail. I wonder if I accidentally have something selected here, because that definitely shouldn't have failed. Yeah, I got no population here, and I wonder what's wrong with that. We're going to run this again real quick just to sort of figure it out. I'm going to stop the video briefly, and then I'll kind of restart it again, when I fix whatever the problem is. No issue there, just me being a dummy. Everything is identical, right? Pop, I've merge ruled sum. White, I've merge ruled sum. Black, I've merge ruled sum. It was just me being a fool with the match option. I accidentally picked within, but that doesn't make any sense because no neighborhood would be within a census block. The neighborhood is bigger, right? The neighborhood contains the census block. That was just me being kind of a little bit foolish and not thinking that one through. So run it, and this one time it'll work. Right, and so it'll bring back something that if I open the attribute table, right, now I can see a couple things. First, you'll have this new field called join count. Essentially what join count means is that's counting the number of, well, whatevers. In this instance, blocks, right? So that would be saying that in Olney, the neighborhood of Olney, right, there's 399. I'll try to zoom out so you can kind of see it. It's a little bit north of where we are. Right, that big neighborhood has 315 different census blocks. All the other attributes preserve themselves. The only difference when I come over here I now have a field that's actually right 38,176. That's how many total people the data found in the kind of blocks that this neighborhood contained. So as I mentioned before, like to kind of deal with that issue of like, well, what does it mean to contain? Like, what happens in those instances where like the lines sort of cross and like, you know, they kind of intersect, even though they're definitely different neighborhoods. You know, one good way around that I've often found is the best thing, in my opinion, to spatially join is points. And, you know, since we don't really care about the boundaries of the census blocks, we just kind of want their data, there's something cool we can actually do. A tool, if you go to data management features, you see there's a bunch of kind of conversions, and it's really actually a neat part of ArcGIS. You can take anything and move it to a point, anything and move it to a line. Right, in this instance, I'll take feature, not feature to polygon, I'll take feature to point, and it's cool. I could literally just take the census blocks and I'll call them block points. Make sure that the point has to be inside. And it's going to give me the same data, the same information, right? The I in the GIS. But the geometry is just simply switched to a point. And now I can actually run this operation a little bit easier, right? Now if I do, for example, let's make them kind of nice and blue so we can see them. I'm not going to run it because I'm going to end the video. But now if I wanted to do the spatial join, right, and I could say, hey, neighborhoods with block points, now it's much easier to say, like, contains, because there's not going to be any instances where there's a point, really, except for this one, which doesn't matter, because it's a cemetery that's on the line, really, right? The blocks essentially are going to be in one area or another, and since they're the centroid of their given block, right, it's representing kind of where there's a majority of area. You know, so it would obviously default to the correct kind of place. That's just something I find is helpful if you have polygon data and you want to move to point data. So just to quickly show you, you know, merge would be totally the same in desktop, so I don't want to focus on that too much. It would be in data management. But just briefly to kind of show you, you know, I'm going to just do it for one of them now, neighborhood 1. But just briefly to sort of show you how this looks, because it looks slightly different. It's under Analysis, Overlay, Spatial Join. Target features would be neighborhood. Join features would be census blocks. The field map isn't as neat, but you still have the same capabilities, right? You can delete fields you don't want. Right? When you get down to that population field, you simply have to right-click to get to the merge rule. Right? The great power of right-click. So it's just a slightly extra step to remember, right? Right-click, hey, I want the sum of you. But everything else is the same, right? So just a little less accessible, right-click to kind of access that summarization rule. Now I'm going to end this video here, but you know, hopefully those that kind of were exploring this tool may have seen that there's another cool option, or two options here for spatial join that say within a distance and closest, which is a little bit different, right? You're not in that instance summarizing by two things that overlap each other or that contain, but rather like looking for connection between two things that are closer to each other than anything else, or trying to summarize all of one element that happens to be within a certain distance of another. So we'll talk about those when we do one of the next videos, which is on sort of measuring distances and such like that. So similar to each video before, after you've run the merge and spatial join in Pro or desktop, just take a screenshot and put it in that PowerPoint presentation to show me that you have watched the video.